It was one of those mornings when everything at the hospital seemed to move faster than usual. The halls echoed with the sound of rolling stretchers, ringing phones, and hurried footsteps. Nurses called out names, doctors carried charts, and the waiting area was already full by 8 o'clock. It was an ordinary day at Riverside General Hospital. Ordinary until a quiet woman walked through the glass doors holding her arm close to her body. She looked calm, but clearly in pain. She wore a gray suit, neat and pressed, as if she had just come from a meeting. Her hair was pinned up neatly and a thin gold watch rested on her wrist. Her name was Dr. Angela Morris, though almost no one in that waiting area knew that name yet. She had recently moved to the city to take on a new position at the hospital, a big one. But that morning she wasn't there as a director or even as a doctor. She was simply another person who needed care. Angela had been feeling dizzy since early morning. She had fainted briefly while preparing for a presentation. Her assistant had insisted she go to the hospital, but Angela, being the kind of person who never liked to cause a scene, had told her driver to take her quietly to the emergency entrance. She didn't want special treatment. She wanted to walk in, get checked, and be on her way. She had no idea that her decision to do so would expose something deeply wrong about the place she had come to lead. When she entered, the first person she saw was the triage nurse behind the counter. The nurse, whose badge read K. Willis, was busy typing on her computer. She didn't look up when Angela approached. The woman at the desk looked stressed, perhaps tired from the morning rush. But there was something else in her expression, something sharp, almost cold. Angela stood there for a moment expecting to be greeted, but the nurse kept typing. "Excuse me," Angela said softly, her voice calm. "I'm not feeling well. I think I may have fainted earlier and my arm hurts." The nurse sighed, glancing up for barely a second before replying. "You'll have to sign in and wait to be called," she said, pushing a clipboard forward without much interest. Her tone was flat, almost impatient. Angela hesitated. "I understand," she said, "but I'm feeling lightheaded. Is it possible to see someone soon?" The nurse frowned slightly. "Everyone here is feeling something," she said. "You'll be seen in order of urgency. Take a seat, please." Angela blinked, taken aback by the response. She wasn't used to being spoken to that way, not because she expected special treatment, but because she had spent her entire career teaching others how to treat patients with compassion. Yet standing there, she realized she was being judged for something else. Maybe it was her quiet tone, or maybe it was the color of her skin. Whatever it was, she could feel the barrier in that nurse's voice, cold and dismissive. She took the clipboard, signed her name, and found an empty chair near the corner of the waiting area. Her arm throbbed. She felt a strange heaviness in her chest, but she took a slow breath and told herself to be patient. The last thing she wanted was to draw attention. Around her, people shifted in their seats, coughing, groaning, staring at the television that played silently above the reception area. Minutes passed. Then 20, then 40. No one called her name. She watched as several other patients who arrived after her were taken in. One was an older man who mentioned chest pain. Understandable. Another was a woman with a cut on her forehead. But then came a few others. A teenager with a sprained ankle, a man complaining about a stomachache. All called before her. The nurse at the desk occasionally glanced her way, but never once checked on her or asked how she was feeling. Angela's head started spinning again. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, trying to steady herself. A young janitor pushing a mop noticed her and paused. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded faintly. "Just a bit dizzy," she whispered. He frowned, glancing toward the desk. "You want me to tell the nurse?" Angela shook her head. "It's fine. I'm waiting my turn." The janitor hesitated, then nodded respectfully and went on with his work. His concern, simple as it was, touched her. She thought about how often kindness came from the people who had the least power in the system. The ones who cleaned the floors, not the ones who wrote the policies. A few seats away, an elderly woman leaned over. "Honey, you don't look well," she said softly. "You should tell them again." Angela smiled weakly. "I'll be all right. Thank you." The older woman shook her head. "Sometimes you have to speak up for yourself in places like this," she muttered. "They don't always listen." Angela knew she was right. She had spent years studying these very issues. How unconscious bias could affect care, how assumptions could change the way patients were treated. She had taught seminars about it. But now she was experiencing it firsthand. and it stung more deeply than any research paper ever could. After nearly an hour, the dizziness became worse. Angela tried to stand but had to grip the side of the chair for balance. She walked carefully back to the counter. "Excuse me," she said again, her voice softer now. "I'm feeling worse. Could someone please check my vitals? I really don't feel right." The nurse didn't hide her annoyance. "Ma'am, as I said before, we have procedures. If it gets worse, we'll take you in sooner. Please have a seat." Angela stared at her for a moment, trying to understand the coldness in those words. The nurse didn't even look at her fully, just waved her away like she was a bother. The waiting room had gone quiet, several people watching the exchange. Angela turned slowly and went back to her seat. Inside, she felt a mix of emotions: frustration, sadness, and something heavier she couldn't quite name. A soft voice broke her thoughts. "Excuse me, are you all right?" It was a young nurse trainee, maybe in her 20s, who had just walked in from the back. She had noticed Angela from across the room. Her eyes showed genuine concern. Angela forced a small smile. "I think I just need to be seen. I fainted earlier and my arm hurts quite a bit." The trainee frowned. "You fainted?" She looked toward the triage desk. "Did you tell Nurse Willis?" "Yes," Angela said. "She asked me to wait." The trainee looked confused. "That doesn't sound right. If you fainted, we should have checked your vitals immediately." She stepped closer. "Can you walk? Let me get someone." Angela nodded, relief washing over her. The trainee hurried off, and for the first time that morning, Angela felt seen. Behind the counter, Nurse Willis noticed the interaction and frowned. She muttered something under her breath and clicked through her computer screen, pretending to be busy. But the trainee returned moments later with a senior doctor, who quickly assessed the situation. Within minutes, Angela was taken to an examination room. As they helped her onto the hospital bed, the young nurse gently wrapped a blood pressure cuff around her arm. "You're going to be okay," she said quietly. "Just relax." Angela nodded, though her mind was spinning. Part of her wanted to speak up about what had happened out there, how she'd been ignored, how she'd nearly fainted again in the waiting area. But another part of her held back. She wanted to understand more before she reacted. She wanted to see how deep the problem really went. When the doctor came in and began examining her, Angela's identity slowly came to light. Her medical record, pulled up on the hospital system, showed her position: Director of Medical Operations. The doctor's eyes widened slightly when he read it. He looked up at her, realizing who she was. "Dr. Morris," he said carefully. "I didn't realize—" Angela gave a faint smile. "That's all right," she said. "I didn't announce it." But he could sense something had happened. The tone in the room shifted instantly. Nurses moved more attentively. Voices became gentler, and the air seemed to hum with quiet tension. News was already spreading down the hallway, whispers traveling fast, carried by nervous staff who had pieced together what had happened in the waiting room. As Angela rested, she thought back to the nurse at the desk, the dismissive tone, the cold eyes, the way she had been treated like she didn't belong there. It wasn't anger she felt. It was disappointment. She had spent her whole career believing in the power of empathy, teaching others that compassion could heal more than medicine sometimes could. And yet, here she was, facing the very problem she'd dedicated her life to fixing. She thought about all the patients who didn't have a title or a position to protect them. The ones who might come in, be ignored, and leave believing their pain didn't matter. The thought broke her heart. The doctor finished his examination and assured her that she'd be fine, though she needed rest and observation for a few hours. As he spoke, she noticed how his voice carried both respect and unease. He knew that once she left that room there would be conversations, difficult ones, the kind that made people look at themselves differently. Angela closed her eyes, letting the sounds of the hospital fill the room, the beeping monitors, the soft footsteps, the distant chatter. She thought about how easily one moment could reveal the truth about a place, how a single act of indifference could tell you more about a system than 100 policy documents ever could. In that quiet moment, she made a decision. She wouldn't react in anger. She wouldn't call for punishment or embarrassment. But she would make sure this never happened again. Not to her, not to anyone. Outside the examination room, the young trainee nurse glanced nervously toward the triage desk. Nurse Willis sat stiffly, her eyes fixed on the computer screen, pretending to type though her hands trembled slightly. She had heard the whispers too. "That woman you ignored. She's the new director." And just like that, everything changed. The quiet room felt heavier now. Angela sat up slowly on the hospital bed, her arm resting in a sling. The doctor had finished his notes and stepped out, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The faint smell of antiseptic filled the air, mixed with the soft hum of machines in the background. She could hear the muffled sounds of conversation from the hallway, voices speaking low but fast, carrying the tension that always comes when news spreads faster than it should. Angela knew what was happening out there. Someone had already told someone else, and soon the whole floor would know who she was. That wasn't what she wanted. She had come in quietly for care, but instead she had walked into a mirror that reflected the very culture she was supposed to help change. The door opened gently. The young nurse trainee, the one who had helped her earlier, stepped inside holding a clipboard. She smiled nervously. "Hi, Dr. Morris," she said softly. "I just came to check on you. How are you feeling now?" Angela returned a small smile. "A bit better, thank you. And please, just call me Angela right now." The nurse nodded, her cheeks coloring slightly. I'm sorry about what happened in the waiting area. I didn't know." Angela raised her hand lightly. "It's all right. You didn't do anything wrong. You helped me when you saw I needed it. That's what matters." The nurse hesitated before saying, "The staff are talking about it." "I think the charge nurse told the head of administration already." Angela sighed. "I see." She looked down at her hands for a moment, tracing the edge of the hospital blanket. "It's strange, you know. I've spent my life teaching healthcare workers to treat every person with kindness. Today I got to feel what it's like when they don't." The young nurse's eyes softened. "I'm really sorry you had to go through that." Angela nodded gently. "Don't be sorry for me. Be sorry for what that says about our system. If it happened to me, imagine how many others it's happened to. People without a title, without a voice." The nurse didn't know what to say. She simply nodded, her expression full of quiet respect. After a moment, she checked Angela's vitals and wrote something on her chart. Before leaving, she said softly, "If you need anything, I'm right outside." When the door closed again, Angela sat in silence. She remembered the look on Nurse Willis's face, not just annoyance, but something deeper, something built over years of assumptions. Angela had seen that look before, not only in hospitals but in boardrooms, interviews, and social gatherings. It was the look people gave when they thought they already knew who you were, before you ever opened your mouth. She leaned back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling. Her head still felt heavy, but her mind was clear. She had planned to start her role officially next week, but now everything had changed. The hospital she was supposed to lead had revealed its weakest point in a single morning. A knock sounded on the door again. This time it was the senior doctor, the same one who had examined her earlier. His voice was cautious, polite, almost too formal now. "Dr. Morris," he began, stepping inside. "I just wanted to check if you're comfortable. We've arranged for a few more tests just to be safe." Angela nodded. "Thank you, doctor. I appreciate your concern." He hesitated at the door. "Also, I wanted to apologize for the way you were treated when you arrived. It doesn't reflect how we want our patients to feel." Angela studied his face. His eyes showed sincerity but also worry, the kind of worry that came from realizing a mistake had been made on his watch. "Apology accepted," she said kindly. "But I hope we don't stop there." The doctor nodded, unsure what she meant but sensing the weight in her tone. "Of course," he said. "We'll review what happened." After he left, Angela smiled faintly. "Review what happened," she repeated in her mind. She'd heard those words before, too many times. They usually meant a few meetings, a few emails, and then silence until the next problem arose. But she had no intention of letting this fade away. A few hours passed. Her blood pressure normalized, and she was cleared to leave later that afternoon. As she got dressed, she glanced in the mirror above the sink. Her reflection looked tired but strong. There was a faint shadow beneath her eyes, yet her expression was calm. She had been embarrassed in public, ignored when she needed help. But somehow she felt stronger for it. When she opened the door to step into the hallway, the young nurse was waiting with her discharge papers. "You're free to go, Dr. Morris," she said, her voice soft. "Do you need a wheelchair?" Angela smiled. "No, thank you. I can walk." As she made her way toward the elevator, people turned to look at her, some out of curiosity, some out of guilt. Nurse Willis stood behind the counter, typing with forced focus, her face pale. For a second, their eyes met. The nurse looked down immediately. Angela didn't say anything. She just gave a polite nod and continued walking. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even thinking about punishment. What she wanted was understanding, the kind that could only come when people saw their actions for what they truly were. When she stepped outside, the sunlight felt warm on her skin. She took a deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs. Her driver rushed over, concerned. "Ma'am, are you all right? Should we head home?" Angela nodded slowly. "Home, yes. But before that, I need to make one stop." The driver looked puzzled but didn't ask questions. He opened the car door and Angela slid in quietly. As they drove, she watched the city pass by. The same city she'd chosen to serve, the same people she wanted to protect. She had come here with dreams of improving the hospital's reputation, of bringing compassion back into care. Now that mission felt more personal than ever. The car pulled up in front of the hospital's main administrative building. The driver looked back in surprise. "Here, ma'am." Angela nodded. "Yes, I need to speak to the team." Inside the building, the air was different from the emergency wing. Quieter, polished, professional. Staff in business clothes moved between offices, holding files and tablets. When Angela walked through the doors, the receptionist smiled politely, not realizing who she was at first. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Do you have an appointment?" Angela smiled faintly. "Not exactly. Could you tell the deputy administrator that Dr. Morris is here?" The receptionist's expression changed instantly. "Oh, of course, Dr. Morris, please, one moment." Within minutes, she was escorted to a conference room. Several members of the leadership team arrived. The deputy administrator, the HR head, and a few department leads. They looked surprised to see her so soon. Her official start date wasn't until next week. She could feel the curiosity in their eyes mixed with worry. Something about her calm expression told them this wasn't a casual visit. When everyone settled, Angela spoke in a measured tone. "I wasn't planning to meet this week," she began. "But something happened today that I think you all should know." The room fell silent. She explained what had happened, every detail. From the moment she entered the emergency department to the way she was spoken to, the dismissive tone, the long wait, the way she had nearly fainted before someone helped her. She didn't exaggerate or raise her voice. She just told the story as it happened, letting the weight of her words speak for itself. When she finished, no one said a word for a long moment. The HR director shifted in her seat, looking uncomfortable. "Dr. Morris, that's deeply troubling," she finally said. "We'll open an investigation immediately." Angela nodded. "I appreciate that, but I don't want this to become just an investigation. I want it to become a lesson. I want every staff member to understand what empathy means, not as a slogan, but as an action." The deputy administrator cleared his throat. "Of course. We'll schedule sensitivity training," Angela interrupted gently. "Not just training. I want conversation, real stories. I want people to talk about what they see and feel every day, the good and the bad. We can't change behavior if we don't understand what drives it." The room grew quiet again. Her calm, steady voice carried authority, not from anger but from conviction. It was the kind of tone that made people listen even if they didn't fully know why. She leaned forward slightly. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. The nurse who dismissed me, I don't want her punished. I want her educated. But I also want the system that allowed her attitude to grow unchecked to be examined." The HR head nodded slowly. "You're right. This isn't just about one person. It's about the environment." Angela smiled faintly. "Exactly." The meeting lasted almost an hour. By the end, everyone looked thoughtful, some even moved. They agreed to create a new internal program, one that would focus not just on diversity but on genuine human empathy. Angela offered to lead the first session herself. When she finally stepped out of the room, she felt both tired and peaceful. She had turned a painful moment into a purpose. That, she thought, was the real work of leadership. As she walked through the hallway toward the exit, she passed a group of nurses chatting near the break room. Their voices lowered when they saw her. One of them, a man in his 30s, stepped forward hesitantly. "Dr. Morris," he said, "I just wanted to say, we heard what happened. Some of us weren't proud of how our department looked today." Angela smiled kindly. "I appreciate that. It's not about pride, though. It's about learning. Every one of us can do better. He nodded slowly, looking relieved. Thank you, ma'am. When she finally left the building, the sky was beginning to dim, painted with streaks of gold and gray. She paused at the top of the steps, looking back at the hospital that now held two meanings for her, one as her place of work, and another as a reminder of why she was there in the first place. In the car, her phone buzzed. A message from the hospital's communications office read, "Welcome to Riverside General, Dr. Morris. We're looking forward to your leadership." She smiled faintly, typing a simple reply. "Thank you. We have work to do." As the car drove away, Angela watched the hospital fade in the distance. The day had started with pain and frustration, but it ended with clarity. She had seen the cracks in the system she was meant to guide, and she had already begun to fill them, not with blame, but with understanding. Tomorrow she would return, and the real change would begin. The next morning came quietly. The air outside was cool and calm, and a thin fog hung over the parking lot of Riverside General Hospital. The building stood tall under the pale sunlight, its glass doors reflecting the morning sky. Inside, everything looked the same: the white walls, the polished floors, the steady hum of daily life. But something had changed. People were whispering more than usual. Conversations paused when certain names were mentioned. A sense of unease had spread through the staff, the kind that comes when people realize the world had been watching, even if no one said it out loud. Angela arrived just after 7. She didn't come in through the executive entrance this time. She entered through the same doors as the patients, the same ones she had walked through the day before when no one had cared who she was. As she stepped inside, she noticed the same nurse sitting at the triage desk. Nurse Willis was already at her station, her posture stiff, her eyes focused on the computer screen. Her hair was neatly tied back, her hands moving quickly over the keyboard. But there was a tightness in her movements, the kind that came from worry. She could feel eyes on her from the other staff, but she pretended not to notice. When she saw Angela walk in, her heart skipped. She looked down instantly, hoping not to be noticed, but Angela didn't walk past. She stopped right in front of the desk. "Good morning," Angela said softly. The nurse swallowed hard. "Good morning, Dr. Morris," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. Angela gave a small nod. "How's your morning so far?" "Busy," the nurse said quietly, eyes still on the computer. "Lots of patients already." Angela glanced at the crowded waiting area, then looked back at her. "That's good. I just wanted to stop by before my meetings." Her tone was calm, kind, without judgment. The nurse hesitated before saying, "Dr. Morris, I wanted to say, I'm sorry about yesterday." Angela looked at her gently. "Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it." She paused for a moment. "But I'd rather we talk later when things aren't so busy. There's something important we all need to discuss." The nurse nodded quickly, her eyes downcast. Angela gave her a polite smile, then continued down the hallway. Word spread fast. The new director was here. By mid-morning, the hospital's internal messaging system sent out an announcement. Mandatory staff meeting, conference room B, 4 p.m. Everyone knew what it was about. In the break room, nurses whispered in small groups. Some defended Willis, saying she had just been stressed. Others said it was about time someone pointed out the attitude problem that had been quietly spreading for years. A few kept silent, unsure of what to think. Meanwhile, Angela sat in her new office for the first time. The large window overlooked the hospital courtyard, where patients and visitors walked slowly under the trees. On her desk sat a framed photo of her parents, both retired teachers, who had taught her that respect was the foundation of every profession. She thought about how proud they would be if they saw her here now, not because of her title, but because of what she planned to do with it. She opened her notebook and began to write. Her pen moved steadily as she listed ideas for change. Real empathy workshops, not just short online training. Anonymous story-sharing sessions for staff to talk about real experiences. Patient feedback programs that focused on kindness and communication. Not just speed, leadership check-ins at every level. So managers heard what was really happening on the floor. She wanted change that lasted. Not a wave of apologies followed by silence. At 1 o'clock sharp, the conference room filled up. Doctors, nurses, clerks, and aides all gathered, some standing along the back wall. The air was tense. People expected anger, maybe even a public scolding. But Angela didn't come to humiliate anyone. She came to wake them up. When she entered the room, the chatter stopped. She stood at the front, no papers in her hands, no slideshow behind her. Just her voice. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her tone warm but steady. "I know you're busy, so I'll be direct." She paused, letting her eyes move across the room. "Yesterday morning, I came to this hospital as a patient. Not as a director. Not as a doctor. Just a person who didn't feel well." People exchanged glances. Some already knew what was coming. Others looked confused, waiting. "I sat in the waiting area for almost an hour," Angela continued. "During that time, I tried to explain that I had fainted earlier and that my arm hurt. But I was told to wait. I was spoken to sharply. I was ignored." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Angela's voice didn't waver. "Eventually, a trainee nurse noticed me and took action. Thanks to her, I was finally seen. But here's the thing, she didn't help me because of who I am. She helped me because she saw me." The room was silent. The nurse trainee standing near the back lowered her gaze, trying not to cry. Angela went on. "I want you to understand something important. What happened to me could happen to anyone who walks through those doors. Maybe it already has. Maybe it happens every day and we just don't see it because we've stopped looking." Her words were gentle but cut deep. "We work in healthcare and we talk about saving lives. But before we can save a life, we have to see a person. We have to make them feel they matter." A doctor in the front row nodded quietly. A few others stared at the floor. Angela's voice softened. "The nurse who spoke to me yesterday made a mistake. But I'm not here to punish her. I'm here because I believe mistakes can teach us more than success ever will." She turned slightly, her gaze finding Nurse Willis among the crowd. "What happened wasn't just one person's fault. It was a reflection of something bigger. Something we all have to face. Burnout, bias, frustration, and routine can harden our hearts if we let them. We start seeing charts and numbers instead of people. We rush, we assume, and in those small moments we forget our purpose." A long silence filled the room. Then Angela took a deep breath. "So here's what we're going to do. Starting next week, we'll begin a new program. One that focuses on real empathy. Not the kind that's written in handbooks, but the kind that comes from understanding." She outlined the plan. Weekly sessions led by staff members, not outside trainers. Open discussions about what it feels like to be ignored, judged, or treated unfairly. Exercises where nurses and doctors would share experiences from both sides of care, as professionals and as patients. "This isn't about blame," Angela said. "It's about awareness. We can't fix what we don't face." When she finished speaking, the room stayed quiet for a few moments. Then slowly people began to nod. A few clapped softly. Others approached her afterward to thank her. Some looked shaken, in a good way. After the meeting, Angela stayed behind as people left. She noticed Nurse Willis lingering near the doorway, unsure whether to approach. Finally, she stepped closer. "Dr. Morris," she said quietly, I don't know how to make this right." Angela looked at her with calm eyes. "By learning from it," she said. "That's how we all make things right." The nurse swallowed hard. "I wasn't trying to be rude yesterday. I was just overwhelmed. Sometimes the waiting room gets so chaotic and—" "I understand," Angela interrupted gently. "This job is hard. I've been where you are. But even on our hardest days, we can't forget compassion. It's what people remember most." Tears welled in the nurse's eyes. "You could have fired me." Angela shook her head. "That wouldn't teach you anything. Growth comes from reflection, not fear." The nurse nodded, voice trembling. "Thank you for giving me another chance." Angela smiled faintly. "Just make it count." That evening, the hospital felt a little different. Conversations were softer, more thoughtful. Nurses checked on patients with a bit more warmth in their tone. The janitor who had spoken to Angela the day before smiled when he saw her walking down the hall. "You feeling better, ma'am?" he asked kindly. She smiled back. "Much better. Thank you for noticing." Later that night, as she sat in her office finishing notes, Angela received an email from one of the senior doctors. It read, "I've worked here for 20 years. I think what happened yesterday opened a lot of eyes, including mine. I'd like to help lead one of those empathy sessions. Count me in," she smiled as she read it. Change had begun, small but real. Before she left for the night, Angela walked through the emergency waiting area again. It was quieter now. A young mother held her child while a nurse brought them water. An elderly man was being helped into a wheelchair. The same triage desk stood there under the soft light, but this time the nurse behind it, not Willis, was smiling kindly. At each patient who approached, Angela stood there for a moment just watching. She could feel something shifting, something she hoped would grow stronger with time. She knew the road ahead would be long. Hospitals didn't change overnight. But she also knew that change didn't start with policies or speeches. It started with people deciding to see each other differently. When she finally walked out into the night air, she looked up at the sky, now clear and full of stars. She thought about how one act of dismissal had turned into a moment of awakening. Maybe that was how change always started, not in grand gestures but in quiet realizations. She got into her car, closed her eyes for a brief moment, and smiled. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, but she was ready. The real work had begun. The next week at Riverside General began differently. It wasn't that the walls looked any brighter or the patients fewer. The emergency room was still busy, the calls still constant. But there was something new in the air. People moved with a quiet awareness, as if the entire hospital had taken a collective deep breath. Angela had spent the weekend preparing. She knew that real change wasn't about writing new policies or sending out emails filled with big words. Real change happened in rooms where people felt safe enough to speak honestly. So, when Monday came, she launched what she called the listening hour. Every department would have one session a week. No uniforms, no hierarchy, no scripts. Just people sitting together talking about what they saw, what they felt, and how they could do better. It wasn't mandatory at first, but she knew curiosity would draw people in. The first meeting took place in a small staff lounge with chairs arranged in a circle. There were nurses, janitors, receptionists, and even a few doctors who had come out of interest. Angela stood at the front, not as a boss, but as part of the group. She wore a simple cardigan and jeans, trying to remove the sense of formality that usually filled these rooms. When everyone settled, she smiled gently. "Thank you for coming. I know this is new and maybe some of you aren't sure what to expect. That's okay. We're just here to talk." A nurse sitting near the back raised her hand. "Talk about what exactly?" Angela nodded. "About what it's like to work here. About the things we see, the things we ignore, and the things that bother us but we never say out loud." The room went quiet for a moment. Then someone spoke, one of the janitors. "Sometimes people don't even look at us," he said softly. "We clean up after patients, we mop the same floors every night, but to most staff we're invisible." Several heads turned toward him. He wasn't angry. He was just stating a truth. Angela nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "It takes courage to speak honestly. And that's exactly why we're here, to listen to voices that don't always get heard." A nurse spoke next. "There's so much pressure," she said. "Sometimes it feels like we're racing against time every day. I think that's why people become cold. Not because they don't care, but because caring takes energy, and we're always running out of it." Angela understood that better than anyone. "That's a powerful point," she said. "It's hard to give empathy when you're exhausted. That's why we have to take care of each other too, not just patients." The discussion grew slowly at first, then flowed more easily. People began opening up, sharing small frustrations, private fears, and even moments they were proud of. A doctor talked about how he once snapped at a patient's family out of stress and regretted it deeply. A receptionist admitted she often felt powerless when patients yelled, because she was the first face they saw but had no control over wait times. For the first time, people were hearing each other as human beings, not just as co-workers performing roles. Angela watched the room, her heart swelling quietly. This honesty, was what healing looked like on the inside. When the session ended, no one rushed out. They lingered, talking softly, exchanging understanding nods. One of the nurses said, "I wish we'd done this years ago." Angela smiled. It's never too late to start. Over the next few weeks, these sessions spread across departments. Some were quiet, others emotional. People laughed, some cried. Stories came out. Moments of kindness, moments of regret. The hospital began to feel different, like a place slowly remembering its heart. But not everyone was convinced. There were still whispers. Some people said the meetings were just a way to make the administration look good. Others thought it was just a passing trend. Angela heard those whispers too, and she didn't ignore them. Change, she knew, always faced resistance at first. One afternoon, she walked through the pediatric ward to visit a young patient who had sent her a thank you card. On her way out, she passed a group of nurses chatting near the counter. Their conversation stopped when they saw her, but she smiled anyway. "Don't let me interrupt," she said warmly. "I just wanted to check in on the team." One of the nurses, a tall man with kind eyes, said, "Actually, Dr. Morris, can I be honest?" "Of course," she replied. He hesitated. "Some people think all these empathy meetings are slowing things down. They say the hospital runs on rules, not feelings." Angela nodded thoughtfully. "That's fair. But tell me, when someone's scared, hurt, or confused, what helps them most? Rules or compassion?" He smiled faintly. "Compassion." "Exactly," she said. "Rules keep us organized. Compassion keeps us human. We need both," he nodded slowly. "That makes sense. I guess people are afraid of being told they're doing things wrong." Angela's tone softened. "It's not about being wrong. It's about being aware. Awareness is how we grow." Later that day, she visited the emergency department again. She wanted to see how the front desk staff were handling patients now. It was busy as always. The line stretched to the door, the phones ringing, the monitors beeping in the background. But something small had changed. The tone was softer. A nurse offered a chair to an elderly man. The receptionist explained wait times patiently instead of brushing people off. The difference wasn't dramatic, but it was real. Angela stood quietly near the entrance, just observing. Then she saw Nurse Willis. The woman was working at the same triage desk, but her face looked different. More open, more careful. A patient approached, frustrated about the wait, and Angela watched as the nurse took a breath before responding kindly. "I understand, sir," she said. "We're trying our best, and I'll make sure you're seen as soon as possible." The man nodded, calming down. Angela smiled. It wasn't perfection, but it was progress. A few minutes later, when the crowd thinned, Willis looked up and noticed Angela watching. Their eyes met, and Angela gave a small, approving nod. The nurse smiled nervously, but this time it was genuine. Later that evening, Angela returned to her office, where her assistant had left a folder of patient feedback forms. She flipped through them slowly, reading the comments. Many were simple. Staff were kind, felt cared for. Nurses listened. Those small words meant everything. But one note stood out. It was written in shaky handwriting on the back of a survey card. It read, "I was scared when I came in, but the nurse talked to me like a friend." That made all the difference. Angela sat back in her chair, smiling softly. That one line was proof that the shift was real. As weeks turned into months, the hospital started getting noticed. A local newspaper ran a small article titled, "Riverside General Finds Humanity in Healthcare." It talked about the new programs, the patient satisfaction improvement, and the calm confidence of the woman leading it all. Angela didn't care about the publicity. What mattered to her were the quiet changes she saw every day. The laughter in break rooms, the softer tone at the front desk, the way staff now helped one another without being asked. Still, not everything was smooth. One afternoon, she received a complaint. Not from a patient, but from a staff member who said the new expectations felt overwhelming. Angela decided to meet with her personally. The woman, a senior nurse with years of experience, looked nervous when she entered Angela's office. "Dr. Morris," she began, "I just wanted to say I respect what you're doing, but some of us feel we're being watched more closely now. It's stressful." Angela listened carefully. "That's fair," she said. "But tell me, do you feel you're being watched or supported?" The nurse paused. "I'm not sure. Maybe both?" Angela smiled kindly. "Then we'll work on making it feel more like support. You see, real leadership isn't about catching mistakes. It's about helping people grow from them." The nurse's shoulders relaxed. "I think I understand. I guess it's just, change is hard." "It is," Angela agreed. "But growth never feels comfortable at first. The discomfort means we're moving forward." That conversation stayed with Angela long after the nurse left. She realized change didn't just need patience, it needed reassurance. People had to feel safe, not judged, to truly transform. By late spring, Riverside General had become known for something unexpected: kindness. Patients noticed it, families mentioned it. Even new employees said they'd heard the hospital had a different energy. Angela often walked through the corridors just to talk with people. She'd ask janitors about their families, check in on nurses, share small jokes with receptionists. She believed leadership wasn't about sitting in a high office. It was about being present, about seeing the people who made everything work. One afternoon, as she walked past the waiting room, she saw a young nurse kneeling beside a patient in a wheelchair, holding their hand while speaking softly. The scene was simple, but it moved her deeply. This was what she had hoped for, a place where compassion didn't have to be taught because it had become natural again. Later that day, as she stood by the window of her office watching the sunset paint the sky, she thought about the journey so far. The humiliation she had faced that morning months ago had turned into something powerful, a ripple of change that kept growing. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Nurse Willis. "Dr. Morris, I wanted to thank you. I've learned more about compassion in these past months than in my entire career. Yesterday, a woman came in who reminded me of you that day. I made sure she got the care she needed right away. I think that's what you meant by learning from it." Angela smiled at the message, her eyes soft. She typed back, "That's exactly what I meant. Thank you for proving that change is possible." She put down her phone and looked out at the hospital courtyard below. Families walked hand in hand. Nurses laughed near the benches and the lights of the emergency room glowed softly through the glass. It was far from perfect, but it was alive, full of heart again. And deep down, Angela knew this was only the beginning. The real test wasn't how much they had changed now. It was whether they could hold on to it when no one was watching. That thought made her smile. She closed her notebook for the day and whispered to herself, "We're finally becoming what we were meant to be." Outside, the night settled over the hospital, calm, steady, and full of quiet hope. The months passed quietly, and Riverside General began to feel like a new place. The change didn't come from shiny new machines or fancy renovations. It came from people. Small things, smiles exchanged in the hallway, a nurse pausing to comfort a crying child, a cleaner helping an old man find his way. These little moments were what truly transformed the hospital. Angela noticed it every day. When she first took over, she used to walk through the corridors and feel tension in the air like invisible weight pressing on everyone's shoulders. Now there was lightness, laughter, conversations that weren't just about medical charts but about life, family, and hope. She loved her early morning walks through the building before it got busy. The hallways were quiet, the sunlight just starting to spill through the tall glass windows. It reminded her of why she had chosen this work, not for titles, not for power, but because helping people was something that made her feel alive. One morning, as she passed the main reception area, she stopped. The same desk where she had once been ignored now had a new energy. The receptionist, a young man with a gentle smile, was greeting patients warmly. "Good morning. You're checked in, and the nurse will call you soon. Would you like some water while you wait?" Angela stood back and watched as the woman nodded gratefully. That simple kindness made her heart swell. A few months ago, that same space had been filled with frustration and impatience. Now it was calm, welcoming, human. She continued down the hallway and peeked into one of the meeting rooms where a group of new hires sat in orientation. They were listening to a presentation titled, "Compassion in Action, the Riverside Way." The slide showed pictures of staff helping patients, smiling, working together. Angela smiled quietly to herself. She hadn't created this phrase. One of the nurses had come up with it, but it had become something of a motto. The Riverside Way was now part of their culture. It meant seeing every person, patient or staff, as someone who mattered. After the session ended, one of the trainers noticed Angela and waved her in. "Dr. Morris, would you like to say a few words?" She hesitated for a second, then nodded. As she stepped to the front, the room grew quiet. She didn't prepare a speech. She just spoke from her heart. "When I first came here," she began softly, "this hospital was already good at saving lives, but something was missing, not skill, not knowledge, but heart. We were treating people, not always caring for them. Over the past year, that has changed. And it's not because of me. It's because of all of you. You've chosen to see patients not as names on a chart, but as human beings. You've reminded this place what compassion looks like." Her voice softened even more. "So when you walk through those doors, remember this. You're not just here to work. You're here to make people feel safe, seen, and respected. That's the Riverside way." The room erupted in gentle applause. A few of the new nurses looked emotional. One of them wiped a tear from her eye, and Angela smiled, knowing her words had reached them. Later that afternoon, she met with the hospital board. Normally, board meetings were stiff and filled with statistics, but this one felt different. The members were curious to hear how the hospital's new culture had affected patient care. Angela presented a few numbers: shorter wait times, better staff retention, higher patient satisfaction, but she didn't dwell on them. Instead, she shared stories. "There was a patient last month," she said, "an elderly man who came in alone, frightened and confused. He didn't have any family nearby. One of our janitors, who had finished his shift, stayed with him the whole night until he was discharged. That's what real care looks like." The room was silent for a moment. Then one of the board members said, "That's extraordinary." Angela smiled. "It's ordinary here now. That's what makes it special." The board approved new funding for wellness programs, including regular staff retreats, mental health support, and a mentorship system to help younger nurses learn empathy from experienced staff. It was exactly what Angela had hoped for. Not just better policies, but real investment in people. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Angela walked to the hospital garden. It had become her favorite place to think. A quiet corner with benches, flowers, and a small fountain. She sat there, letting the sound of the water calm her mind. She thought about everything that had happened since that morning she was denied care. If she closed her eyes, she could still see it clearly. The waiting room, the nurse's sharp tone, the disbelief she felt. It had hurt deeply then, but now that pain had turned into purpose. It was strange how something that once made her feel invisible had led her to create a place where no one would feel invisible again. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. It was Nurse Willis. The woman looked different now, calmer, humbler, and somehow softer. She approached slowly, holding a small envelope. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "Not at all," Angela replied with a gentle smile. "Please sit down." Willis sat beside her, her hands trembling slightly as she handed over the envelope. "I wanted to give you this. It's something I wrote a while ago. I didn't know if I should, but it feels right now." Angela took it and opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first line made her throat tighten. "I want to apologize again, not just for what I did that day, but for what I didn't see." Willis looked down, her voice quiet. "I've replayed that morning so many times in my head. I was tired, stressed, and I let my assumptions speak louder than my duty. You had every right to fire me, but instead you taught me. You showed me what real leadership is. I'll never forget that." Angela folded the letter gently and placed it back in the envelope. "Thank you for writing this," she said softly. "That means a lot to me." Willis hesitated, then asked, "Do you think people like me can really change?" Angela turned to her, her eyes kind. "You already have. Change isn't about forgetting the past. It's about learning from it. And you've done that beautifully." The nurse's eyes welled up, but she smiled. "Thank you, Dr. Morris, for everything." They sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade across the garden. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, one that needed no more words. Weeks later, something unexpected happened. A national health organization reached out to Riverside General. They had heard about the hospital's new programs and wanted to feature it in their annual conference as a model for compassionate care. Angela was invited to speak. At first, she hesitated. She didn't like attention. She preferred doing the work quietly, but she realized it was a chance to share a message bigger than herself. When the day came, she stood on a large stage in front of hundreds of healthcare professionals. She wasn't nervous, just calm and focused. "I want to tell you a story," she began, her voice steady but gentle. "A while ago, I came to a hospital, at my own hospital, seeking help. I was ignored, not because of who I was, but because of what someone assumed about me. That experience could have broken me. But instead, it opened my eyes." She paused for a moment, scanning the audience. "I realized that healthcare isn't just about medicine. It's about humanity. Every person who walks through our doors carries a story, and our job isn't just to heal their bodies, but to honor their dignity. At Riverside General, we learned that lesson the hard way, but we learned it well." By the time she finished, the audience was silent, deeply moved. Then one by one, they began to applaud. It wasn't loud or rushed. It was heartfelt. Angela smiled quietly, humbled by the response. Afterward, several people approached her saying they wanted to start similar programs at their hospitals. That made her happier than any award could. It meant the change that began at Riverside was spreading beyond its walls. When she returned home, she found a note waiting on her desk. It was from the young nurse who had attended her orientation talk months earlier. It read, "I chose nursing because of what you said that day. That compassion I